There are stories that leave us speechless, but what Isabella experienced after her death defies all logic. She not only crossed to the other side, but Jesus revealed a truth to her that few are prepared to hear. What she saw and what was told to her will forever change your perception of life. Are you ready to find out? Her name is Isabella, and what I am about to narrate is not a dream nor a hallucination. It is something that is lived, something that transformed my life forever. I never imagined I would die, but that is exactly what happened. I crossed to the other side and saw things I never would have believed possible. What I saw, what Jesus showed me, is something the world needs to know. That day started like any other. I woke up early, made my coffee, and followed my routine, as always. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but there was something in the air, a strange feeling I couldn't identify. And at that moment I didn't give it much thought. I got into the car and followed the usual route to work, not imagining it would be the last time I would take that route. The traffic was heavy and my mind was on 1,000 things: work stress, debts, everyday worries. But then something happened that changed everything. A sudden pain in my chest, a feeling of emptiness, and suddenly, the impact. A strong blow, the sound of breaking glass, distant screams, and then silence. When I opened my eyes, something wasn't right. I could see my own body inside the car, motionless. I saw people running towards me. I saw paramedics trying to get me out of the vehicle, but I wasn't in my body. I was floating above the scene, observing everything with an impossible clarity to describe. I felt no fear, no pain, just a profound peace. But the strangest thing was the light, a warm, living light that began to envelop everything. Something was calling me. It was a feeling impossible to resist. I wasn't walking, I wasn't flying, but I was moving towards that light as if being absorbed by an invisible force. I had no control, but I also didn't want to resist. The light became more intense, and with it, a sensation of absolute love, which I had never felt on earth. It was as if everything I had always sought was there, waiting for me. Suddenly, I found myself in a completely different place. It was an immense and beautiful space, with colors I had never seen before, with a peace that cannot be described in words. The air was light, almost as if I was breathing light instead of oxygen. Then I saw him before me. It was Jesus. His presence was impossible to ignore. I didn't need to be told who he was. I knew as soon as I saw him. His face, his gaze, was pure love. But there was also something more in his expression. Something serious that made me feel I was about to receive an important message. He looked into my eyes and said, "It wasn't your time." His voice wasn't just a sound. It was something I felt inside my being. Each word had weight, an undeniable truth. I wanted to respond, to ask so many things. But before I could say anything, he raised a hand and the world around me changed again. Suddenly I was seeing something that took my breath away. I saw the earth, but not as we know it. It was as if I could see the reality behind the physical veil. I saw spiritual forces in motion, invisible influences that most people ignore. I saw spiritual chains binding people without them knowing. I saw lights in some places and shadows in others. Then, Jesus showed me something that left me speechless. He showed me the truth about what happens when we die. I saw souls arriving at this same place where I was, some with faces of peace, others with expressions of terror and regret. I saw the weight of their lives reflected in their essence. I saw how their actions on earth determined what would happen after death. I wanted to understand more, but Jesus just looked at me with that expression of love and authority that enveloped me. And then, he showed me something else, something that left me completely breathless. My heart was pounding, or at least I felt it was. Although I no longer had a physical body at that moment, the presence of Jesus was so intense that I could barely process what I was seeing. But then, with a single gesture of his hand, everything changed. The place where we were disappeared. Suddenly, I found myself floating over what seemed to be Earth, but it wasn't Earth as we know it. I saw cities, villages, and people, but what really struck me was what was behind it all. I saw threads of light connecting certain people, a special glow surrounding some of them, but I also saw dense shadows covering many others, and then I saw something I will never forget. Before me, Jesus showed me a vision of Africa, not the Africa we see in the news or history books, but a different glorious Africa, full of light. I saw magnificent cities, ancient civilizations with a spiritual wisdom that seemed to surpass everything I knew. I saw dark-skinned people walking with a presence, an authority, a connection with the divine that was almost palpable. Their energy was different, as if they were tuned to something greater, something the world had forgotten. I looked at Jesus, trying to understand what I was seeing. Then he spoke. The truth was hidden from them. His voice reverberated inside me like an echo in my soul. They were chosen for something great, but the world deceived them, made them forget who they really are. Suddenly, the vision changed. I saw people being taken from their lands, separated from their families, forced to forget their roots, their language, their history, their connection with God, not just for what they lived physically, but for what they were losing spiritually. I saw how generation after generation they were told they were nothing, that they were worthless. And most strikingly, I saw the spiritual influence behind it all. It wasn't just history. It was a carefully executed plan to erase their identity. Jesus looked at me, and with sadness in his voice said, "The enemy feared their power, feared what they could do if they remembered who they really are." My mind couldn't comprehend it all. I felt overwhelmed by the amount of information I was receiving. But then, the vision changed again. I saw the present, communities struggling, people who felt trapped without understanding why. I saw many without hope, believing they were destined to suffer, that there was no greater purpose for them. Then, I saw some who were awakening, people who somehow began to remember, to question, to seek something deeper. I saw how a spark ignited in them, and this spark began to illuminate other people. Jesus smiled slightly and said, "The time of awakening has begun." My soul trembled with these words. I wanted to ask more, but before I could, the vision changed once again. What I saw next left me breathless. My body trembled, although I no longer had one. What I was seeing was not just history. It was a truth that had been hidden for generations. I felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of it all, but Jesus remained by my side with that look of love and compassion that made me feel safe. Despite everything I was seeing, the vision became even deeper. I saw the modern world, but not in the way I had seen it before. I saw invisible structures that controlled people's minds. I saw how, through education, media, and institutions, the lie had been carefully sown, generation after generation, so that no one would question anything. Everything was planned so that this truth would never come to light. I saw fear in the hearts of many, an imposed fear. A fear that made them doubt their own worth, their own identity. And then Jesus showed me something even more striking. I saw how the enemy had infiltrated everything, not just in history, but in spirituality itself. Religious structures were created to distort the truth, to make people believe that the connection with God was external, when it had always been within. I saw how many sought answers in the wrong places. Religion had become a tool of manipulation to keep people blind, to keep them slaves to a system that would never allow them to remember who they really were. Jesus looked at me and said firmly, "The greatest lie was not physical oppression, but spiritual oppression, because if a soul doesn't know who it is, it will never claim its inheritance." I felt a shiver run through my body. This was not just about the past, but about the present and the future. I saw how many people were beginning to question, to awaken, but the enemy was counter-attacking with more force. I saw how the world was filled with distractions, chaos, constant noise, to prevent souls from finding the silence necessary to hear the voice of God within them. I saw how materialism, individualism, selfishness were promoted, all to prevent people from truly uniting and understanding the power they had when they aligned with their divine purpose. "The battle has always been spiritual," said Jesus, "and now it is reaching its most critical point." Suddenly, I saw a great darkness covering the world. It was like a thick veil, a shadow that spread over entire nations. But within that shadow, there were small lights shining, lights that lit up one by one until forming a network of light that began to break the darkness. I saw people awakening, remembering, finding their purpose. I saw communities coming together. I saw families healing. I saw spiritual chains breaking. Then I understood. It was not just about knowing the truth, but about living it, sharing it, helping others to see it. Jesus looked at me with a serious expression, but full of love. The awakening will not be easy. The enemy will do everything to prevent it, will use fear, confusion, doubt. But those who listen, those who remember, will have the responsibility to guide others. At that moment, I felt a weight on my shoulders. Not a weight of burden, but of responsibility. I knew that what I had seen was not to keep to myself, but to share. Suddenly, the vision changed again. I saw what would come next. I saw events that shook the world. I saw difficult trials, times of confusion. But I also saw a great transformation. I saw people reclaiming their power, communities flourishing, the truth shining like never before. And just when I was trying to assimilate all this, I felt something pulling me. It was as if I was being returned to my body. I tried to resist. I tried to stay a little longer to better understand what I was seeing. But the voice of Jesus resonated one last time. It's time to go back. Now your mission begins. And in an instant, I opened my eyes. I opened my eyes suddenly, gasping, feeling my body as if it weighed tons. I was back to reality, but nothing seemed real. Everything I had seen, everything I had heard was etched in my soul, like fire burning in my insides. My ears buzzed. My vision took time to adjust, and my chest rose and fell rapidly. I had returned, but I was no longer the same person who had left. The hospital monitors beeped uncontrollably. The nurses ran with expressions of astonishment and fear on their faces. I knew what had happened was a miracle. I saw a doctor frozen in the doorway, with wide eyes holding a chart that seemed about to fall from his hands. I felt the weight of the gazes on me, but my mind was elsewhere. My family was there crying, touching me as if they couldn't believe I was really alive. My mother held my hand, her fingers trembling. "Isabella, oh my God, can you hear me?" I looked at her, but couldn't respond immediately. My mouth was dry, my throat burned, and my mind was still in that other dimension. Slowly, the voices around me began to become clearer. The doctor, who apparently was the head of emergency, finally spoke with disbelief on his face. "This is impossible. You were dead. Clinically dead." My mother sobbed, while my sister squeezed my other hand. I wanted to speak. I wanted to tell what I had seen, what Jesus had revealed to me. But I couldn't put it into words. And how to explain something so immense when I could barely understand it myself? The following days were strange. Although my body was weak, my spirit was stronger than ever. I felt a connection with something greater, as if the veil between this world and the other had not completely closed. But along with this clarity came a burden, a weight I couldn't ignore. What I saw in that vision was not just for me. I knew I needed to speak, I needed to share, but how to do it without them thinking I was crazy? Who would believe me? I sat on the hospital bed, looking out the window, feeling the world move around me, as if I didn't fully belong to it. My thoughts came and went incessantly. And then, like a deep whisper in my soul, I heard Jesus' voice once more. "Speak." My skin tingled. I looked around, but I was alone. The voice didn't come from outside, it came from within. I closed my eyes and felt the same warmth I had felt in his presence. "Speak. The truth must be revealed." My heart pounded. I knew what I needed to do. The first time I tried to talk about what I had seen, the reaction was not what I expected. My family was too busy celebrating my return to pay attention to what I was trying to explain. I don't blame them. Their joy was understandable. But when I finally gathered my closest friends and family to tell my testimony, everything became more difficult than I imagined. I explained in detail every part of my experience. The sensation of leaving my body, the journey through the tunnel of light, Jesus' revelation about humanity's true history, and how everything had been manipulated to keep us blind. I talked about ancient civilizations, the the spiritual power that was erased from history, the illusion that kept us asleep. But as soon as I finished, what I received was not understanding, but empty looks, discomfort, and skepticism. My sister was the first to speak. Yes, that sounds. She hesitated, looking for the right way to say it without offending me. Too much, I asked incredulously. Too much for whom? For you. Because for me it was real. More real than anything I've ever lived here. The whispers began among those present. Some tried to calm me, others simply avoided my gaze. What you saw may have been a hallucination, said one of my uncles. You know, the brain does strange things when someone is. Well, you know, my blood boiled. Do they really believe this was a hallucination? I saw Jesus. He showed me the truth. He told me with his own words. How can they deny something so powerful just because it doesn't fit their idea of reality? But no one wanted to argue. No one wanted to accept. It was at that moment that I understood something. People don't reject the truth because it's not believable. They reject it because it forces them to question everything they have believed until now. And that scares. The following days were lonely. My friends and family began to treat me differently, as if I were disturbed. They gave me short answers, avoided my calls. Some even left my messages unread without responding. It hurt me. It hurt more than I expected. But deep down, I understood. Jesus warned me that this message would not be easy to accept. There will be those who will hear and those who will close their ears. But you must continue. I knew I couldn't stay silent, so I took my phone and started writing my story. I decided to share my testimony online, regardless of the consequences. I didn't know what would happen, if anyone would listen to me or if I would just be ignored, as it happened with my family. But that didn't matter. What mattered was speaking, doing what I was asked. I pressed publish. Within hours, my life changed forever. I didn't know what to expect when I published my testimony. A part of me thought it would go unnoticed, buried among thousands of stories on the internet. Another part feared being rejected, that people would ridicule me, as my friends and family had done. But what happened was something I never imagined. Within hours, my story went viral. Thousands of people began to comment, share, and react. I received messages from people all over the world, saying that my words resonated with something inside them, that they felt there was truth in what I was saying. But not everyone agreed. The criticism was quick to arrive. Some said I was crazy, that it had all been a hallucination caused by lack of oxygen to my brain. Others claimed I was making it all up for attention. But what surprised me the most was the number of people who seemed bothered by my experience. Not because they didn't believe in it, but because it made them question too much. There were those who said that this kind of revelation was dangerous, that I could be being deceived by dark forces disguised as light. Others insisted that Jesus would never appear to talk about these things, that the truth was already written and there was nothing more to learn. But there were also those who knew exactly what I was talking about. I received private messages from people who had seen the same, who had also died and had similar visions. They talked about the manipulation of history, about the spiritual oppression, about the deception in which the world was trapped. There were pastors, researchers, even people who had never believed in God until they had their own near-death experience. All said the same thing. There was something hidden that needed to be revealed. But then, something strange began to happen. The next day, my post disappeared. It wasn't anything on my part, nor on the part of any moderator. It simply ceased to exist. It wasn't on my profile, nor in my drafts. There was no deletion notification, nor warnings. It was as if it had never been published. I tried to rewrite it. I posted a video explaining what had happened, but soon after it also disappeared. My account was temporarily blocked, without explanation. Something was wrong. I started receiving emails from strangers. Some were attempts at warning. Stop talking about this. You have no idea what you're touching. Others were more sinister, with veiled threats or messages without a sender. But the worst was when my phone started receiving calls from numbers that didn't exist. When I answered, I only heard deep breaths. No one spoke. No one hung up. Just silence. One night, while reviewing my computer to try to recover something from my testimony, All the lights in my house flickered at the same time. My screen went black, and when it came back on, there was a single message on it. Stop. I was paralyzed. This was not a coincidence. It couldn't be. The physical world was not the only one reacting to my testimony. Something else was also doing it. Something that didn't want people to know the truth. But what was really bothering these forces? I thought about what Jesus had shown me, the revelation about humanity's true history, about the spiritual oppression, about the power that had been taken. Then I understood. The enemy doesn't fear people knowing the story. He fears people remembering who they truly are. He fears people remembering who they truly are. That night I knelt beside my bed and prayed with all the strength of my heart. Lord, tell me what to do. Tell me how to continue. I felt a deep peace envelop me, and within me I heard his voice. Do not fear. Move forward. Jesus didn't show me all this just to scare me and stop me. He showed me so I would speak. The next day I tried again. I created new accounts, used different platforms, sent personal emails with my story, shared in forums, in private groups, anywhere it could be seen. And this time something incredible happened. People not only read, but began to share their own experiences. Others who had died and returned began to speak. Some had seen the same thing as me. Others had seen different aspects of the same truth, and together everything began to make sense. The story we were told about who we are, where we came from, and what our purpose is had been manipulated for centuries. We were made to forget, kept busy, distracted, and afraid to look beyond what we were taught. But now, people were awakening. The comments were full of questions, doubts, and personal revelations. It was as if a spark had been lit and was starting a fire that no one could put out. But it wasn't just the people who reacted. A few days later, I received an anonymous email. There was no sender. But the message was clear. Stop talking. That same night, I heard footsteps outside my house. Heavy and slow footsteps. I looked out the window, but there was no one. I reviewed the security cameras and, in the recording, the only thing that appeared was the silhouette of an elongated shadow, moving in a way that didn't seem human. My skin tingled. I knew what I was seeing. It wasn't just a physical threat, it was spiritual. I felt fear, of course I did, but something inside me lit up with more force. Jesus chose me to see this for a reason. And if the enemy was reacting like this, it was because he knew the truth was coming to light. I refused to stay silent. The question now wasn't if I should continue speaking. The question was how far I was willing to go for the world to know the truth. That feeling of having been marked, of having been chosen to share such a great message, wouldn't leave me in peace. My mind remained trapped in what I had seen, in what Jesus had shown me. The truth that was revealed to me was not just knowledge, but a responsibility. Every day that passed without speaking about it, I felt a pressure in my chest, an inner voice telling me, you need to speak, you need to tell the truth. But the fear was also there, strong and present. How could I face rejection, disbelief, the danger that could come from telling something so impactful? The first attempt to share my experience was with my family. I sat with them in the living room, with trembling hands, and told them everything I had lived on the other side. Their faces went from surprise to confusion, and then to doubt. My mother, with tears in her eyes, tried to calm me. Isabella, my love, you almost died. Maybe all this was a hallucination. My sister looked at me with sadness. You must have dreamed all this while you were unconscious. My father, the quietest of all, simply got up and left the room without saying a word. But I knew it wasn't a dream. I had felt, I had seen, I had been there. And I couldn't stay silent just because others couldn't understand. So I tried to share my story with more people. I contacted some friends, some spiritual leaders, even tried to talk to someone from the church, but what I found was not acceptance, but resistance. This sounds like something out of a movie, a pastor told me. Maybe you should pray more and make sure this really comes from God. Another person simply ignored me. Some thought I was crazy. Others believed I had imagined it all. But deep in my soul, I knew it was real. When I decided to share my testimony on the internet, things began to change. I posted a video telling my experience, explaining what Jesus had shown me, the message about souls, about the hidden truth that had been manipulated for centuries. I didn't expect much, but within hours the video began to receive hundreds of comments. Some people thanked me for sharing it. I've always felt there was something more. Something they weren't telling us. Someone wrote. Another commented. Your story made me cry. I feel like God is calling me to something greater. But not everything was support. There were also attacks, messages full of hate, accusations, mockery. Some even said I was making it all up for attention. At first, these comments hurt me. They made me doubt. I asked myself if I should really continue speaking, if it was worth facing so much rejection. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jesus' gaze. His voice echoed in my mind. Speak, do not fear. It was then that I realized that fear was part of the test. The enemy didn't want the truth to come to light. And if I was receiving so much resistance, it was because my message had power. Little by little, my story began to reach more and more people. Some pastors contacted me privately, saying they felt my testimony was true, but they couldn't talk about it in public, for fear of being rejected. I realized that many people felt the same, but fear kept them silent. And then, I understood that my mission was not to convince everyone, but to speak to those who were ready to hear. But just when I thought I was finding my purpose, things started to get strange. My phone started to malfunction. Videos I posted disappeared without explanation. My computer would turn off by itself while I was writing about my experience. At first, I thought they were coincidences, but then I started receiving calls from unknown numbers at any time of day and night. When I answered, there was no one on the other end of the line, just heavy breathing, as if someone was listening. One night, while working on a new video, my screen flickered and suddenly went black. When I tried to turn it on again, a message appeared in my email. Stop talking. You don't know what you're dealing with. My heart raced. I felt a chill down my spine. This was not normal. It wasn't just hate on the internet. It was something more. Something that was trying to stop me. I looked around my room, feeling watched. Something in the environment had changed. It was as if a dark presence had infiltrated my house, and then I saw a reflection on my computer screen, something in the corner of my room. I turned quickly, but there was nothing. I felt a knot in my stomach. I knew this was bigger than I imagined, but instead of scaring me, something inside me ignited. I remembered Jesus' words. I remembered what he had shown me. The enemy doesn't attack those who don't pose a threat. If something was trying to silence me, it was because the truth I carried was too powerful. So I decided I wouldn't stay silent. The next day, I prepared a new video, more direct, more courageous. If they wanted to stop me, they would have to do more than send me warning messages. I had seen the truth, and the truth needed to be told. The determination to move forward with my testimony filled me with courage, but also made me realize that I was entering a battle bigger than I ever imagined. It wasn't just a fight against disbelief or rejection. It was a spiritual war. And when someone carries a message that threatens the darkness doesn't stand still. The video I published that night was different from the previous ones. I wasn't just telling my story, but speaking directly about the attack I started to experience. I told people what was happening, the strange messages, the deleted videos, the feeling of being watched. I didn't do it to scare anyone, but to make it clear that what I had seen was real. If it wasn't, why were so many people trying to silence me? The response to the video was overwhelming. Thousands of people watched it in the first few hours. Supportive comments began to flood my networks. You are not alone. I also feel that something has been hidden from us. Continue. We are with you. But there were also different, more disturbing messages. You are entering dangerous territory. You don't know who is listening. Some messages had no sender. Others were just chains of meaningless numbers. And then, there was a call that changed everything. It was after midnight when my phone rang. The number had no identification. I hesitated to answer, but a force inside me told me to do so. When I put the phone to my ear at first, I only heard silence. Then, a deep and distorted voice spoke. Go away. Don't continue. My heart raced. It wasn't a common threat. There was something in that voice that froze my blood. A mix of hatred and something else. Fear. as if whoever was on the other side knew they couldn't stop me completely, but wanted to try. I hung up. Immediately I stared at my phone, trying to process what had just happened. But before I could breathe, my lamp started to flicker. My computer, which was off, turned on by itself and showed a black screen with only one sentence written. Silence is safety. I stood up suddenly, my body on high alert. I looked around the room, feeling watched. Something wasn't right. Something was here. I felt a shiver running up my spine. It's the same feeling I had felt the night I saw that shadow in my room. Only this time it was stronger, more intense. I closed my eyes and murmured, "Protect me." As soon as I pronounced his name, the air in the room changed. The pressure on my chest disappeared. The fear, although still present, lost control over me. I knew this wasn't just a warning. It was a test. A last opportunity. They had to scare me before I made the definitive decision. Would I continue speaking, or would I surrender to fear? The answer was obvious. I wouldn't be silent. The next morning, I decided to do something radical. If the darkness wanted to silence me, I would speak louder. I contacted an independent platform and asked to do a live broadcast without filters, without censorship. I would tell my complete story, without fear of reprisals. People needed to know. The world needed to hear the truth. When the time for the broadcast came, my heart was pounding, but not with fear, but with determination. Thousands of people connected in a matter of minutes. The audience kept growing as I spoke. I told everything, from my accident to the encounter with Jesus, the visions, the truth about souls, the oppression that had existed for generations, and how the powers of this world had manipulated history to hide the light. And then something unexpected happened. While I was speaking, the signals started to fail. The screen flickered, the image froze, but something incredible happened in the chat. People began to say they felt something powerful. Some were crying. Others said their bodies were experiencing chills, as if a divine presence was with them. It was as if Jesus himself was confirming my testimony in real time. The broadcast was interrupted before I could finish. The platform sent me a message saying the video had been removed for unknown reasons, but it no longer mattered. The message had reached, and people didn't stay silent. Hundreds of people began to share what they heard, to tell their own experiences, to awaken. I knew I had crossed a boundary from which there was no return. The war had begun, but I wasn't afraid, because now I wasn't alone. The environment around me began to change again, and I felt I was about to see something even deeper. Jesus looked at me with an intensity I had never felt before, as if what he was about to show me was of utmost importance. He extended his hand, and suddenly, the space around us transformed into something completely different. Before me, a vision appeared, as if I was seeing the history of the world unfold before my eyes. I saw ancient lands, civilizations that seemed more advanced than history told us. I saw great cities full of knowledge, people with immense wisdom, a connection with the divine that was stronger than I ever imagined. I looked at Jesus in amazement. I didn't understand what I was seeing. The history was altered, he said with a firm voice. Truths were hidden, and lies were taught for generations. Those whom the world tried to oppress are more important than they were made to believe. My heart was pounding. I knew exactly who he was talking about. In front of me, the visions continued to change, showing how these people, who were once spiritual leaders and guardians of divine knowledge, were taken from their lands, chained, reduced to slavery, and stripped of their identity. I saw ships full of people being taken far from their homes. I saw their tears, their pain, their suffering. But I also saw something else. Despite everything they had faced, their spirit had never been broken. The true battle was never just physical. Jesus continued. It was spiritual. There was a deep fear in those who wanted to keep them subdued, because they knew who they really were. They knew that within them was something powerful, something that, if awakened, would change the world. The visions continued to unfold before me. I saw entire generations being forced to forget their true purpose. I saw how they were taught lies about themselves, how society conditioned them to believe they were not important, that they had no value. But then I saw something different. I saw people awakening. I saw hearts igniting with a new understanding of who they truly were. I saw how the veil of lies began to break and how a greater truth began to come to light. The time of revelation has come, Jesus said. Many have begun to remember, to claim what belongs to them. Those who were oppressed will see that they were never alone, that I was always with them, waiting for the moment when their hearts are ready to receive the truth. My eyes filled with tears. It wasn't just history. It wasn't just the past. This was happening right now. I could feel it. Jesus looked at me with tenderness, but also with seriousness. You must tell what you saw, because this truth cannot remain hidden. I wanted to say something more, but before I could respond, the environment around me began to fade. The light, the visions, everything began to dissipate like mist carried by the wind. I felt a force pulling me back, as if I was being taken back to my body. I tried to resist. I wanted to stay there. I wanted to continue learning, continue seeing, but it was useless. A second later, I opened my eyes. All at once, the sound of monitors, the voices of doctors, the light of hospital lamps, everything hit my senses at once. I found myself again in the hospital bed, with tears streaming down my face. The doctors looked at me with disbelief. My family was by my side, crying, holding my hands, but I could barely process it. My mind was still in that other place. I knew what I had seen. I knew what Jesus had shown me. And most importantly, I knew I couldn't stay silent. Since that day, my life changed completely. I couldn't continue living as before, not after receiving such a great revelation. I knew that speaking about it would bring rejection, doubts, even anger from some people. But I also knew there were those who were ready to hear, who in the depths of their being knew that something in history didn't fit, that the world was built on lies, and that the truth was beginning to come to light. Since then, I have shared my experience with anyone who wanted to listen. Some call me crazy. Others say it was all a product of my imagination. But there are also those who felt something in their hearts when they heard my story, who know that what I say is true because it echoes in their own souls. Jesus made it clear to me, the truth cannot remain hidden. We are entering a time of revelation, and those who have been marginalized for so long are about to discover who they really are. My mission is not to convince anyone. My mission is to tell what I saw, and if my story has reached you, maybe it's not by chance. Maybe it's because you are also ready to awaken. If this story impacted you, imagine what is yet to be discovered. Subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any incredible testimony like this. Leave your like and comment what you think about this impactful revelation. Don't go yet. Click on the video on the screen and continue discovering the hidden truths that no one dares to tell.